Recording. Today's subject is anger. And the Mesilat Yesharim takes a very interesting approach. I think it's very creative because we find many times that the rabbis, especially in the Midrash, in the Talmud, speak about anger. And anger is considered one of the worst character traits possible. We know that Moses is criticized for anger, right? And he loses his right to go into the land of Israel for hitting the rock, which was, as many of the commentaries explain, an act of anger. Just by the way, Uri, who's muted, I'm not sure he's listening. Uri, are you there? Oh, he is there. He is there. Yep. Okay. Uri showed me a beautiful, beautiful insight by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who asked the question, how could it be, what is the justice in Moses hitting the rock, not being allowed into the land? It seems way over the top. It seems a punishment not in constant with the sin.
Not consistent.
Not consistent with the sin. So Rabbi Sachs says Moses's position was a leader, and he was a leader of the people. And when he hit the rock, he displayed that he was the leader of the people that left Egypt, the slaves that left Egypt. He was talking their language. But the people who were coming into the land of Israel are a new generation. It's 40 years later. They wouldn't grow up as slaves. You can't speak to them as slaves. So what really he says is it's not so much a punishment as just a reality that he was not the leader that was going to lead the people into the land. Right? Needed someone that could relate to them on their level, who they were, free people, had to speak to them in their language. And smiting the rock was the language of slavery. Speaking to the rock would have been the language of freedom. And that's why Moses, many people don't know this, when they first come out of Egypt, they go and they don't have water. And the people complain. And God tells Moses, go with your rod and smite the rock. And he does that. And water comes out and everyone's happy. 40 years later, when they lose the well, and now he has to, the people are thirsty again, God says, take the rod, that same rod you took, but this time speak to the rock. It's almost like the message that Moshe was meant to make was, look, I've got the rod, but I'm not using it. I'm just speaking. Okay, so anger. We find many statements about anger. Let's discuss them. Okay, how does this work? Okay, now, before we discuss them, let's look, right? There are different types of anger, right? We know that how angry are you is a good question. So we have this lovely graphic over here, Journey to Wellness. I have no clue who made this, but I liked it. The angometer. Angometer, you can be chilled, you're smiling, you have slow breaths, sensitive and on the edge, you got fast breathing and more move faster. Then you get annoyed, snappy, low tolerance, tight chest, muscle tense, angry, gritted teeth, tight fists, yelling, swearing, and then rage, screaming, hot, slamming doors, and no control. And says, create your own with your symptoms, red flags, match your interventions to your level of anger. The more anger, the more tools. So if you're chilled, carry on. Sensitive, breathing. I'm not sure why, but stopping, thank you. Stopping to breathe is a very good way to relax your emotions. It's very, it just shows how we holistic beings. And our emotions are connected to our body. If our body is annoyed, is getting on edge, breathing slows the body down, also slows the emotions down. Annoyed, breathing and muscle relaxation, do some stretches. Angry, walk away. It's never good to react when angry. Scream into your pillow and 20 minutes timeout. I'm not sure about the screaming into the pillow bit actually, but maybe. And rage, remove self and use all tools. Okay. Now, says now the way that the Mesilat Yesharim does it, he goes from worst to best. So it really should work up, but somehow he worked down. There is an anger, he says, an anger-prone person, about which our sages said, whoever gets angry is as if he worships idols. This person gets angry on anything that is done against his will. He becomes filled with wrath till his heart is no longer with him and his judgment is lost. So I think the two insights over here. One is, why is it idolatrous? Because this person, why does he get angry? So the Mesilat Yesharim, he explains to us, it's going against his will. What is idolatry? Idolatry is that there is another will in the world that is at least at odds with God's, right? Against your will, against his will. So it's God's will that runs the world, not your will. And this person that uses anger to try and fulfill his will, because after all, what is anger? Anger is a natural, I would say, reaction to trying to push through the obstacles against one's will. You know, I want quiet, I'm going to get angry with my class in order to quieten them to fulfill my will. So this person who gets angry on anything that is done against his will is basically saying that it's his will that should rule supreme in the world. Well, that is idolatrous, because worshiping idols is that there's some other will that's ultimately in control of this world. The second insight I like over here is he becomes filled with wrath till his heart is no longer with him. This is a very insightful way of saying what happens to a person who gets angry. Yeah, we all understand that a person gets angry, has all those physical things, right? Their heartbeat, they get red, they get tense, but really they lose touch with who they are. And then they might do things which their judgment is lost, right? They've lost their sensitivities. They've lost their conscience. They've lost themselves in their anger. So this is clearly the worst of all. This is number one, our number one offender, anger-prone offender, and they are the worst type of people. Hang on a second. A man like this would suffer to destroy the whole world. A man like this would suffice to destroy the whole world if he had the ability. For the intellect does not rule over him in the least. he's literally lost his reason, just like a predatory beast. Okay. So it's very sad that we have leaders around the world that are really controlling so much of our world who can be angry people. It's really quite astounding. And I think, politically, it would seem that rage attracts rage. I think politicians often use their anger not because they use it as a way of attracting support, because people are angry. A lot of people suffer from anger. They are entitled. They are arrogant. They feel that the world should be going their way. They are very frustrated, and they have this anger. And these leaders play into that with their own rage and their own anger, and they can actually get a lot of support. It's a terrible thing.
Presumably,
January 6th.
Sorry.
January 6th is a good example.
Did you hear, Saul?
No,
Did
I
you hear,
said-
Saul?
I just pointing out that January 6th is a very good example of how destructive anger
Yeah,
can be.
January 6th is a good example of, people wanting to express their anger.
I was going to also ask if the Ramchal goes on to distinguish between white hot anger and anger, fake anger being used to manipulate situations because it's intimidating, but the person is really completely control, and righteous anger, which is a whole different class of anger.
Yes.
So I'm assuming we'll get to that.
Yes, we will. We
Okay.
will. At least one of them.
Okay.
Okay, good. Number 2. Oh, sorry. I do know why I had this picture. Okay, if this person is compared to an idolater, what is the idol they are serving? Themselves, right? Themselves. Now,
Very good.
just as something to think about in our current society is the preoccupation with self and these, I actually Googled someone bowing down to themselves or bowing down to their mirror image. And this is what came up. And I liked it because the whole idea of the selfie is a preoccupation with the self. How am I looking? It's about me, me, me. And then what happens when the world doesn't go like me, me, me? So then, is this feeding into an angry, right? This would be a question for sociologists, right? And psychologists. Does the preoccupation with self, which is being promoted almost, I think, by mistake. I don't think the makers of the iPhone ever imagined that it would have the social ramifications that it does. These are as right, unforeseen. Uri, what's the phrase? Unexpected.
Unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences. I think that the preoccupation with self that's come from the smartphone revolution is an unintended consequence. I don't think they realize it. I think they thought about it as an easy means to communication, which of course it is, but that it should reflect back on oneself all the time is unintended, but it's there. And I wonder if we can link, this would be a theory worth testing, I think. Can we link the rise of anger in politics, both on the left and the right, to this rise of and this increase of self-interest and worship that has occurred through technology?
It's more anonymity and lack of accountability that you get from technology and remote communication.
Okay, I hear that as a contending theory, right? That also is true.
It facilitates anger, but what allows you to get angry is you're unaccountable.
Right.
You're
Also,
anonymous.
right. You can be interesting. Fine. Okay, number two. By the way, I don't know if you can see it clearly, but there's meant to be smoke coming out of her ears.
Yeah, you can
we
see it.
And I think anger is meant to come out of one's nose, but somehow this picture is coming out of her ears, which I think is a nice picture. Number two, when his threshold of anger is reached, he will erupt in great fury. This is what our sages of blessed memory said: difficult to anger and difficult to appease. So the reason why they're number two, because they don't get angry about everything. But these people, when they do get angry, you don't want to be around because they are difficult to anger and difficult to appease. So this would be, if we went back to our, right? This is a person who gets, it doesn't really work with our graphic, but if the first one was rage, the second one is angry. These are angry people. And when they get angry, you don't want to be around. Number three. So he does not come to anger easily. It's hard to anger him. And even if his anger is triggered, it will only be a small anger. He's in control of himself. And he will not stray out of the ways of reason. As anger marks an impression over him, he has not gone out of the category of a person of anger. So it's
You picked the
interesting.
perfect person.
Sorry?
You picked the perfect person to show.
Oh, for my graphic?
Yes.
It's out
Yes.
of character.
I think so. He is able to get a little angry, but when he gets angry, he doesn't seem to lose his reason.
Not at all.
It's under control.
So that's pretty good. Number three. Then number four, he says, person is difficult to anger, and his anger does not damage and destroy. This is what our sages of blessed memory refer to as saying, difficult to anger and easy to appease. He is certainly worthy of praise. So I guess what he's saying is such a person, his anger is even less than the number three, meaning he doesn't really get angry. And if he does, it's a little bit, and he's quite easily appeased. Our sages of blessed memory said, who hangs the earth on nothing, blima, which this is a pasuk in Eov, and it's really talking about the fact that, God hangs the earth on, things that are very ethereal. But the Talmud makes a drasha and says that the earth endures on the merit of one who restrains bolem, his mouth, during a dispute. So you have to read it. The earth hangs on bolem, not blima. Right? It's a classic way of the Talmud making a drasha, changing the letters around a little, and it's in this person's merit that the world continues. Namely, his nature has roused him to anger, and through strengthening himself over it, he restrains his tongue. So there's great control over himself. Now, then we have the level of Hillel the elder. Now, we don't have pictures of Hillel. It was a bit before the advent of photography. But this picture is actually a picture of a very famous Baal Musa called the Altar of Slobodka of Nosson Tzvi Finkel, who was known to be of incredible character and self-control. And I imagined he would be something like Hillel. The level of Hillel the elder, however, was above all of these, for he was not upset for anything whatsoever, and not even stirring of anger aroused within him. This is certainly one who is absolutely clean of anger. So that's why this is over here in the section of nikiyut, of cleanliness, is because that is the ideal, that a person is of such awareness, of such calm, that really nothing angers them. Now, does that mean that everything goes their way? Absolutely not. Does that mean they don't get, let's say, frustrated, or, I'm trying to think of the other words. But annoyed. To some degree, I think so. Meaning, but it's not anger. It might be, try think of a situation which makes you angry. And then think about, well, how would you approach it without any anger at all? What emotions would you use? What emotions would you experience in dealing with the world in a calm way at all times?
Rabbi,
Yes.
are you talking about having equanimity within the anger that the world is, what's going on in the world around you that might provoke you, but you're trying to keep calm, your soul calm in the middle of the whirlpool?
Yes,
Equanimity is the right word.
I think so. That you have, and the question would be, what thoughts does a person like that have? What character are they expressing? Any thoughts?
Restraint.
A lot of self-discipline. I think actually, the more I think about it, the more it requires a tremendous amount of self-discipline.
Very difficult with us laymen.
Yeah, of course it's difficult, right? There are 5 levels, right? You already said that. Anyone else?
You could say it's not worth getting angry about.
Exactly. I mean, the sky's not going to fall down. It's not so
I
bad.
have a different take
Just
on
a
it.
fair.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
right.
I have a different take
just-
on it.
Audrey, hang on one second. I think
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
just thinking about what Avram has said and Saul, I think that means perspective, living with perspective, and always keeping a large perspective in mind. When you have that, I think when we get angry, generally speaking, we focus in. That's what anger does. It focuses in on something almost absolutely. But if you take a step back and think, well, what's really happening here? And what's the big picture? You're right. The big picture is well, if I react with anger, that's not going to help the situation. That's not going to make anything better. Lori, is your comment directly on this? Otherwise, I'm going to go
Yes,
back to Audrey.
directly on this.
Okay, fine.
I don't react to my anger in some way, whether, I mean, you may not see that I'm angry, but if I don't react to my anger, I keep it in and I feel sometimes ill because of it. I will be self-harming to myself in ways of overeating or over drinking or, it is not healthy if I'm not able to at least verbalize, even in a kind and caring way. But if I hold that anger in, it's not always good. And I have to find a way of channeling my anger in a healthy way.
It's very interesting. I don't think he discusses this at all. I think I hear you. I think we all have that level of anger, which if we don't express it somewhat, we will not be able to squash it. It will come back. So I don't know what he does with that. I don't know what he expected us to do with that. Anyone has some good ideas? I mean, I guess our picture before the graphic about screaming in your pillow, that really is what it's about.
Well, I can piggyback on what Lori's saying, and that pulls me into what I was going to say, that my take on it's a little different. And that is that Hillel the Elder lived way before feminism opened its ways and eyes, et cetera, et cetera. And back in I think it was 1980, I attended a women's group that talked about what do women do with anger. And although it is now 40 years later, I believe it is still mostly true for most women, that most women take anger and instead of, I'll say most women of my age, let's put it that way, old people, instead of recognizing it as anger, because anger is so foreign to us as little girls, we were not allowed to be angry, we were not allowed to express our anger, that it became depression. I'm sad. You make me sad. Well, you know what? It's not necessarily sad. You make me mad. Whoever the you is, whatever the you is, whatever the antecedent is before the consequence. The anger is the consequence of the action, a person or a society or what have you. And I think that what you can do is to face it as a human being and say, I am angry about blah, blah, blah. And then possibly you don't have to get to that rage state. You don't have to get to the state where you're slamming doors. And for me, I kind of take an attitude in my better moments when I'm really working it. I call it meh. You know how you see MEH, like, oh, well, what are you going to do? That's the way it is. And just accept things for what they are. People are not going to be what I want. No one is going to bend to my will. And there is a God and it ain't me. So I think that's how it was dealt with especially by women, probably some men. And that's my take on it.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. I think the younger generation of women have no problem knowing that they are angry and expressing it. But I can understand how it used to be a very unfeminine thing to do, to be angry.
Very unaccepted for a woman, a girl to show her anger.
Yeah. And then it would be falsely recognized, I think. Yeah. I don't think that's
subverted,
right.
Subverted by that person into
Right.
depression, hurt. I'm hurt. Well, I'm not hurt. I'm angry. And it's very hard to come up if you've been taught to suppress your anger all your life. When you finally want to let it out, sometimes it is hard to restrain yourself. but it's healthier than me going into
Right.
my kind of self damaging behaviors.
I don't have it here, but Rabbi Soloveitchik writes about the power of speech. And I think it is, sometimes it can be halachically a very difficult thing to do, or challenging, let's say, but sometimes when you're angry and you speak it out to someone else, normally we get angry with people. So if you speak to someone else about what happened, often that your anger can dwindle, and you can get perspective, and you can just the very, maybe what you're saying, recognition of your anger, and having, as Laurie said, some method of some form of expression is enough.
Well, you say talk it out. Isn't that what talk therapy is about?
Yeah,
I mean,
that would promote that.
What that is, and isn't it true that, women have always had friends that they can talk with and let it out with in a safe environment, much like we are a safe group here. What we say is not going to be denigrated or put down. And
Right.
I think that many Jewish values are very good, strong values, but not all.
Audrey, you could
men.
make a big theory here. I don't know, I'm in my big theory day, that, women traditionally have had maybe more time or whatever for friendship, or are more akin to friendship. And maybe that's why they're not associated with anger as much as men, right?
I think that women are naturally hardwired to be willing to share more so than men. What about keep it in, man up,
Right. Yeah.
I think that's hardwired in men. I do. But see, I told you I was coming at it from a different way. That's
Nice.
where I
Thank
was.
you for sharing. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
does the Yetzer come into play with anger?
That's what.
Does
Yetzer
the
hara.
Yetzer hara, the evil inclination,
Yeah, it does.
come into play with anger? What do you think?
Well, it could, jab you and make you feel insulted, make you, whatever the anger is. Anger is a very negative thing. So it could be part of, the Yetzer hara's plan or whatever, or ability, to make you lose yourself in that negativity.
No, just take one aspect of Yetzer hara, the ego. When you, I think I speak for myself, sometimes I get angry, and then very quickly the anger is complicated and increased by something called the ego. And, it becomes, I think
Insulting.
Yeah.
Insulting.
you're insulted, you're, whatever it is. The ego can fuel a tremendous amount of anger.
That's where that's the function of the superego, to quash that.
Sorry, say that again?
If you have a strong superego, if a person has a strong superego, he's able to overcome
Yeah.
the Yetzer hara,
Yep.
the ego part of us.
Yeah. Well, in the Musa, framework, you would use what the Mesilat Yesharim is saying is your seichel, your rational mind, is not with you. And that's the tension over here. Okay, just one more idea. Our sages of blessed memory warned us, Uri, this is the part you asked about, warned us not to get angry even for the sake of a mitzvah. Not even a teacher with his student or a father with his son. That is not to say he should not chastise them. Rather, he should surely chastise them, just not out of anger. but rather with no other purpose than guiding them along the right path. And then he adds, any anger that he shows to them should be only of the face, not anger of the heart. So it's interesting, right? That's a educational, an educational format for this. I guess, does it apply to leadership? The way you asked it was, do you use your anger to manipulate? I think it has to be used very wisely. I'd be very nervous about a leader using anger in a, as he says, the anger of the face and not anger of the heart, in order to achieve some political end.
Hitler was a master of that, certainly.
Right, Hillel. It would
Do you
seem that
think
Hillel never even
Not-
showed
not-
anger of the face.
No, I said Hitler was a master of
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes,
of influencing people by using his anger and
Yeah.
showing it.
yeah.
Telling them to show it
Mhm.
and telling other people to show it.
The question is, how angry was he really? Was it a show, or he had real
It was
anger?
egotism,
Well, it might have been part.
egotism and power.
Yeah, my only question is, was he at sometimes actually not anger, but showed anger in order to arouse the crowds and arouse the anger in other people?
Well, that's what Saul just said.
Yeah,
One theory is that he was really afraid, and he used anger to overcome his fear
His insecurity.
of presumably fear of the Jews.
interesting. It's okay. That's a nice thought, by the way. Anger often covers up something.
Mhm.
Why can't you deal with this in a calm and rational way? Often there's difficult answers to those questions. You might feel that you're responsible sometimes. You might feel that you're a victim. You might, all sorts of things. You can see Uri shaking his head.
Clearly, none of this in the Torah applies to God, who gets angry all the time. and
Oh,
does
great
things.
question. So what are we going to do with God getting angry all the time? So Rabbeinu Nissim, one of the great Rishonim, one of the great middle ages rabbi leaders of Judaism, said you have to understand anger in the Torah, especially from God, in an allegorical sense. God doesn't get angry. He doesn't lose his rational self. Well, it's only that we see the outcome of his actions, which can be sometimes very harsh. He does chastise his children. Yes, he does. But that
And the
isn't,
prophets would the same apply to the prophets who are angry all the time.
I would hope so. I would hope so.
No, they have righteous anger. And I'm still waiting to see whether any of this acknowledges and accepts some degree of righteous anger.
I don't think so. I don't think the Ramchal did. I think,
No, maybe not the Ramchal, but others.
right.
Rambam, let's
Yuri,
say,
what would you consider righteous anger?
the prophets are righteously angry about injustice.
That's right. You see
Does that
corruption.
make it righteous for you or somebody else? We all have our own levels of interpreting things as well.
No, but the prophets are not setting themselves up as idols when they're angry at exploitation of the poor and the widow and the stranger. That is righteous anger. and the people shall be punished for it, etc., etc., etc. There's no room for that in the Ramchal's world.
There are also things that the prophets do that make people angry that are not necessarily right.
Probably.
I think if we find that the prophet himself or herself is not punished for their anger, I think that we would then assume that it was, you can call it righteous anger, but I don't think it's the anger of it's not the anger that takes control of the person. It's the person controlling their anger, which I think, is there a middle path? I'm trying to explore that. Meaning, you could act as if you're angry. We can all act. And inside you're not angry. That for sure is what maybe the prophets did. You want to, I'm sensing what you're saying is, no, they really got angry, but they got angry for a very good reason. That's righteous anger.
Yes.
But I don't know, according to his definition, if that anger is aroused, can you really still keep your mind? Yeah, I guess he said that in level 3, he said that he will not stray out of the ways of reason. As anger, it's only a small amount of anger that does not distort his ways of reason. Maybe. Okay, what to think about. Folks, thank you very much. I want to wish Uri at Seischem Shalom. Is going to Israel for 3 weeks.
Oh,
Have a lovely trip.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go
And
safely and come home safely.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope to.
Safe
Thank you.
travels.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
okay, and I hope to see you all again next Monday.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rabbi.
you.
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rabbi. Bye-bye.
Okay.
you.
Bye. Bye.
Have a good week, everyone.
You too.
And Norma, bye.